But today it doesn't feel as cold, and I had to actually swap my jacket. Go for it. We
Okay.
live.
Oh, we live, Anissa.
We are live.
Lovely chatting to you again. Another week has gone by, and we'd like to welcome all of our viewers and a very, very warm welcome to you on this cold Johannesburg afternoon. We've had some not so nice weather, and I believe it's the same for you, Anissa. But I guess we've got to experience the winter and be appreciative of the changes of the season and that we get to experience it. So I'd like to welcome everybody. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Today we were supposed to have a guest on, and because of the weather again, we had to reshuffle our speaker for today because apparently she's been experiencing a hurricane where
Yeah.
she's from.
So
Where
they're in the
exactly is
Caribbean.
Lisa?
In the Caribbean. She's in the Caribbean and she's going through, they literally are going through a hurricane right now. The fact that she
Wow.
even wanted to attempt to have this conversation today, I said to her, no, my darling, safety first, self
Yeah.
care first. And then when you're ready to come and tell the tale of that experience, I think that would be an even more profound story to be telling and sharing.
Absolutely. And I mean, our thoughts and our prayers are with her, with everyone who's around her, and hopefully that they'll all remain safe and overcome this. And we'll have her soon back on, I'm sure, to share her story
Yes.
with us. So that leaves us with no guest for today. So our audience is just going to have to make do with Anissa and I. And as we were chatting a little bit before we got on, I think that I would love for our discussion today to be centered around who we see ourselves as people in our lives. We're so concerned with the way that we show up, the way that we portray ourselves, the images that we have of each other, the masks that we put on in order to be accepted. But the most important thing is how we see ourselves. And I came
Mhm.
across this on social media, and it was just this beautiful expression of exactly that, and I'd like to share it with you all. It's by Cody Brett, and it goes like this: the way people view you. Sometimes I think about the different characters I play in everybody's story. I'm a terrible person in some people's narratives and a godsend in others. And none of it has anything to do with the person I truly am. The lens that others view you through is colored by their upbringing, beliefs, and individual experiences. Some people see the bright personality as endearing, and others see it as annoying. Some people think you're weak and emotional, and others feel safe to be themselves around you. Some people think you're rude and selfish, and others respect the way you stand up for yourself. Some people admire the way you take pride in the way you look, and others think you're conceited. And none of it has to do with who you truly are as a person. What you have to understand is that you have no authority over how people view you. So never, never try to control the way others see you. Because the only thing that truly matters when the dust settles down at the end of the day is what you genuinely see in yourself. And I found this to be so impactful and had such um, a great significance to me after reading this because of certain events
Mhm.
that have unfolded in the past weeks for me especially, but also it's something that you go through. I think everybody goes through in their lives. And I find that it's such a shame that we concentrate so much on what other people's views are of who we are. And we allow it to bring ourselves down. We allow it to sometimes send us into a depression. And I think it's so important that we remove ourselves from this, or we understand that, as he says, it's truly a reflection of them, of their beliefs, of their understandings, of their experiences growing up. So I think that for me, this is such a pertinent topic for anybody going through any stage in their life, whether you're an adolescent, especially when you're, in your teens. It's particularly impactful on you because you go through so much people pleasing. You want to fit in. You feel like you have to behave in a certain way to be accepted by others. And this continues through every phase in our lives, depending on how much work we've done on ourselves, how much we've enlightened ourselves, how much we have delved and tried to educate ourselves and gotten to know who we are, how much we've stopped to actually listen to that inner child, that inner voice, and to commend them, to be proud of them. So I thought that I'd share this with you, and perhaps maybe just have a discussion around this, seeing that it was so impromptu in us losing our guest for today. But I think that it's such an important subject to broach, Anissa. How do you resonate with this? Do you feel like you've gone through this in your life? And I mean, in your coaching, I'm sure that you've come across many people who have trouble with this, have trouble with acknowledging who they genuinely are, and being proud of that.
Nothing is by mistake. Everything is by design that we're having this conversation. Simply because I just came from a meeting with a beautiful soul who's also just recently graduated in psychology. Her name is Deirdre. And we were having this conversation, this exact conversation. So prior to us, I just got to discover about a half an hour before we went live that our guest wasn't coming on. This discussion was with my client, with an acquaintance, kind of prior to that. And now you have introduced that this needs to be the conversation for today. So I believe it's all divinely orchestrated in the way that it should be, because there are too many people that are living life in suffering with those masks, suffering with those personas that they're trying so hard to live up to, or the ideals, or the societal norms, or the faith-based norms even. Let's not forget about that as well. And the educational norms. So there's so many various constructs, and you're right that this is a conversation for anyone and everyone to connect to. And even in my conversation with Deirdre, it was, where is this formed? This is formed in our early former years. It does not matter where and how you were raised. If you were raised in a very stable, beautiful, warm upbringing, or whether you came from a volatile, wounded, traumatic, tragic experience in your life throughout your childhood to where you are now. Because this need to be accepted and have belonging is an innate need that every human being has, right? And unfortunately, those knowingly, unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally around us do wreak havoc, because that's the energetic vibration that they are sitting with. So when they are judgmental, it's actually innately what they're judging in themselves, but it's so much easier to project to the outside world. And it's so much easier just to label and criticize and make others feel less than or smaller, because deep down, as you rightfully say, it's that inner child within them that's not healed, that has an unmet need, an unmet desire, that desire to feel accepted for who they truly are. And interesting, Deirdre was saying earlier on, that she had this, and I don't want to divulge too much of our conversation, but she was also saying that a lot of who she is today and why she wants to serve is because of those childhood experiences that made us feel less than, and often than not from the very people that were meant to be our protectors, our guides, our safe spaces, but they're not. So I have learned from my perspective to live in an imperfectly perfect space and to be okay with it. And so if anybody gives me criticism, I'm accepting of it, and I'm almost wanting to be curious more than being judgment of them. And I want to give them grace more than, again, judging them, because I know that I was them too. I was also in ego and in judgment. And it took me several years through my own healing journey and path to say, well, what have I got to sit with within myself? So as much as it's hard to be on the receiving end of those very, it's volatile exchanges from others, they are also a gift to us to remind us how far we've come in our own journey, or how much more we need to walk the journey. That's my view on it.
I agree 100% with you on that, Anissa, because I think that by you having that that train of thought of trying to understand where they're coming from, it actually just exemplifies how far you've come and how far you've gone in your journey looking inwardly towards yourself. Because it's only by acknowledging who you are and understanding where you've come from and drawing those similar experiences when you probably felt that way as well, are you able then to recognize it in someone else? And you take it in a totally different way, where you don't allow it to upset you or anger you or retaliate, in an angry way to them, but rather you take it from a point of understanding of where they are along, how far they are along in their journey. And you also recognize that it often comes as a form of self-protection, where they lash out at you in order to be able to stand back and not attack you before that they feel that they would be attacked. So it's sad, and like you say, it's also ego driven. It's easy for you to judge someone else. It's easy for you to say, oh, but this person is like this and this person comes across like that. It's a lot more difficult to ask yourself the question, what is driving me to say this about someone else? And in as much as we can see that in a negative light, we can see it also in a positive light as well, is that if we are not able to be so raw and just bear it all with ourselves, even when it comes to something as beautiful as kindness, we can only be as kind to someone else in as much as we are kind to ourselves. So
Agreed.
I can be in an environment where I've let's take, for example, my son, for example. I can teach him how to be kind to himself, or I can teach him how to be kind to others and respectful towards others. And I can teach him how to be a good host and a great person, a great friend. But he can only do that to the level of how kind he is towards himself, how respectful he is towards himself, how forgiving he is towards himself. Only then are we able to respond to others on that same level.
I agree with you. I just want to acknowledge those that are here from Instagram, Craig and Firoza and Black Conceptus. I'm always amazed at the names on Instagram, or the handles is the politically correct word. But thank you for being here. And I want to encourage those that are here to share with us in the comments and interact and engage with us today, where you felt like less than and not good enough or not worthy of, or feel like you're the black sheep and you almost have to constantly be on high alert and vigilance to be someone that society expects you to become, to fit in, to feel like you belong. I wanna change gear, although we'll stay with the same conversation flow. I also want to be mindful of the labels that we give others and equally ourselves. So we use the word ego so broadly, and that person's full of ego. And it gets such a bad rap that ego is all bad. And I've said this on the segments many a times. It's not all bad. It is there as an absolute reminder to us to say, where are we operating from? So when ego shows up, it's absolutely a gift for you to say, what is coming up for you in those moments that you are responding from that position? Hello, Ronald. As always, good to have you here. I know it's only 8:30 in the morning in the States, but we appreciate your warmth and your kindness and your graciousness always when you do join us. What I want to then segue into, Jamila, is this labels of narcissism and narcissistic traits. And it's the buzzword, and everybody say, I'm dealing with a narcissist. And everyone these days are narcissist. And it becomes such a scapegoat that we can point the finger and say, well, this person hasn't done their work and they're narcissistic. Now, if every relationship is a mirror to us, to take heed, those very narcissistic behavioral traits or what you are recognizing in that person, just remember that when we are triggered ourselves, we also have narcissistic traits that show up. And so we've got to be very careful and cautious for constantly pointing fingers and labels and judging others and freely throwing out those terms. Now, there are different thresholds and levels of narcissism as well. And, you know, some of it is what is called MPD. It's a personality disorder. And this is deeply rooted in the pathology of the person. And quite frankly, I almost want to say it's a losing battle if you're going to try and fight fire with fire there, because it is something that needs to be diagnosed, and often than not is not diagnosed. So how do we then show up in us that's in this mental well-being realm, Jamila? What is our responsibility as facilitators of health and well-being and wellness overall to bring awareness of this and in a way that is kind, to your point, and gentle? Or are we going to perpetuate the cycle of narcissism and narcissistic traits by almost fighting back towards those individuals? What are your stances on that?
No, Anisa, I think that, like you said, there's a lot of buzzwords going around. And it's quite convenient for you to use this and abuse it for your own benefit. Okay. Oftentimes it's used as a cop out. And I think the very basis of what we do is for us to gain an understanding of who we are at our core, right? And to bring attention on that. And that should, in fact, be what's most important for us on this journey, is to look within ourselves and to understand who we are as people and to accept ourselves for who we are as individuals, both the shadow part of us as well as the light. Okay, so it's about the yin and the yang, and expressing and understanding and accepting all of who we are. And sometimes that's not easy to do. Sometimes you have to look at the cold, bitter, hard truths about ourselves. And we are not by any means perfect, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is for us to look at ourselves again with kindness and with forgiveness, but with reflection and with truth. And I think once we are able to do that, then we let go of judgment, firstly, on ourselves. We get to a better understanding of who we are, what drives us, what the patterns of behavior we've picked up from our families, our societies, from generations, really, so to speak, and to explore those bravely, and to accept it, to acknowledge it, and thereby go forward to change it. So I think that a lot of people are also responding to their lives and the people in their lives with anger and bitterness, and therefore judgment. And so it's so easy for you to throw out these accusations of narcissism, of people having specific personality disorders. And yes, in as much as, you know, those are real issues to deal with, I don't think that it's effective or helpful for us to look at people or to judge people in that sense. Like you say, you can't fight fire with fire. If you are experiencing someone who is a true narcissist, then you're not going to get anywhere by going at that person. You have to look at yourself and your life and what's best for you. And most times it's for you to remove yourself from that situation and to go forward and to work on yourself and realize why it is that you place yourself in this continuous pattern of being attracted to a narcissist. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of accountability and admitting a lot to yourself. And it's quite
Do you
a journey
see?
to be able to do that, right?
So I like that last part that you said, because it's very much resonating with what Ronald has said there. Hiding from you, I hide from myself.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. And I don't think he could have said it any better than that.
Very well said.
And
Very
people
well
are
said.
so afraid of. You've done a lot of different techniques, right? Where
Yeah.
you do mirror work. How easy is it to do mirror work?
Oh
Until you
no. Oh my
attempt,
God.
and until you attempt to do it, do you realize how difficult it is to look at yourself in the eyes and
Do
actually
you know?
see who it is, who that authentic person is, and accept you for everything that you know is within you.
I'm laughing. You know why I'm laughing? Because I was just telling Deirdre, who I met earlier. You know,
Yeah.
it's winter and the diet hasn't been good, and so I've been eating unhealthy, and I've just been indulging and having fun. And so the weight is packed on a bit, the face is fuller, everywhere else seems to be getting fuller. But what's interesting is like, as I was looking in the mirror this morning, I was like, I was laughing at myself. I was almost having fun and saying, yes, you carry on. I know you're just having fun right now. But it was such a different feeling than before, where I was probably looking my best, but internally I was not my best.
Yeah.
So that looking in the mirror in the past, oh my gosh, I could not even face myself because of the shame, the guilt, the anger, and the sheer disappointment that I had with myself, first and foremost, and how I disappointed me by showing up as this constant people pleaser, hero, rescuer, savior, but yet, and our topic was supposed to be about self care and grief. And it's very apt that that can still be relevant today, because I was grieving, not taking care of me. I was grieving the fact that I was showing up for everyone, but not me. But who was to blame? So by looking in the mirror, it was the hardest thing ever, because it was pointing it right back at me, where I needed to witness myself. And I needed to get raw and real and ugly and dirty and say, well, listen, you are the one that needs to make the shift here. And I
Absolutely.
had to learn around, what am I projecting to the world as everyone's the problem and it's not me.
Yeah.
And so I had to come into grace for myself. And when I came into grace for myself, that's when I could really look in inside of my eyes and say, you know what, I'm really sorry. And that whole Ho'oponopono meditation keeps coming up because I sobbed for weeks on end
Mm.
listening to
Mm.
that meditation where you say you're sorry. I'm sorry, Anissa. I forgive you, Anissa. I thank you, Anissa, for making through what you did over all these years, and I love you. Oh, my
Mm.
word.
Like, powerful, powerful words, Anissa. And you know, until you say it to yourself, only then do you understand or realize the extent of the power in those words. Because it's coming
Yes.
to bringing yourself to a place where you acknowledge the cold hard truth about who you are, and you take that
Mm,
step towards living in that truth. And
mm,
you know, too many of us go by our lives just never taking that step. And when you
yes.
finally do, the emotion that you become overwhelmed with is unprecedented, right? And you said you
Yes.
sobbed for weeks, but the first time that you actually pluck up the courage to be able to look at yourself in your eyes and see the person that you are, only then can you understand how much you have given up of yourself, how much you
Yes.
have um, let yourself down, how
Mm-hmm.
much you have hurt yourself, but it also allows you to see the strength within yourself and to pick
Yes.
yourself up and forgive yourself because you were doing the best that you could do with what you knew at the time. Sometimes we're in
Mm,
this space and it's just it's a mode of, you're in a mode of survival, absolutely survival, right? Because you're just doing what's going to get you through to the next moment
mm-hmm.
and the next moment. And most times you're in a state of desperation. And
Yep.
when you're in the state, you're literally doing what you need to do to survive without much thought that goes into it. And the thing that gets me is that most of us go through most of our life experiencing this and we don't realize it. And we're in this heightened
Yeah.
state of constant survival mode. And it can only
Mm-hmm.
last so long before you bomb out, before you explode, before you have a nervous breakdown, or before you come to that realization and where you
Mm.
can take that next brave step to actually sit down and look yourself in the mirror. And it's an amazing journey, isn't it? And it's such a journey of gratitude for me. I was speaking to a friend of mine, Nicole, today, and we were having this
Mm.
discussion about how fortunate we are to be able to
Yes.
be experiencing this in our lives now, where we are questioning, where we are understanding, where we are accepting, where we are stopping the judgment, where we are actually stopping the suffering. Um, and it's a beautiful place to be at.
I I had a similar convo with Shida from Zambia, and we were saying that when you are observing chaos and trauma and wounds and labels and suffering around you, you are almost able to just be that observer from the outside in, having walked a journey, but not coming there as egoic and saying I'm arrived and I'm more elevated and more conscious. No,
Mm,
because the journey is never linear and there's too many layers of unlearning to do
mm,
before we can say we've reached a point of enlightenment. So I'm of the believer that we're never quite enlightened, that the journey and the cycle needs to be from the cradle to the grave. And I'm passionate about knowing that if I can witness and just be an observer and not participate in the chaos, I can then have blameless discernment. It's again
mm,
linking back to that no judgment, because if I can see that that chaos, that toxicity at one stage, and maybe not only in the past, I'm human, I'm fallible. I still fail. I still falter in many ways. as a human being in all my circles, be it my friendships, be it my professional realms. If there's a trigger, I might respond again in that way from turmoil, from chaos. But what I do love is that I'm able to quickly bounce back. So that's the beauty of the work and the realm that we are operating in, is to know that we have to just practice the pause, give ourselves grace in that moment. Because if the highest power, the Almighty God, Allah, whoever, however others refer to it in that higher power, is most forgiving and most merciful, and allows others to be forgiven in their transgressions, some more severe than others, who are we as human beings to judge any other person equally ourselves? So I love that aspect of it, that it allows me to bounce back quicker. And as long as I'm in gratitude of that, because when we're living from gratitude, you live from a place of whatever is happening, no matter how difficult or fearful the experience presents to you, you still are in gratitude, because you know you're going to walk away. You mentioned reflection. Post that reflection is what insights then come from it. And yes, Ronald, somewhere under the heap of coping mechanisms of a journey mess, there resides true self. And yes, we do like to pull away the curtain. This is the point here. And then lack of empathy, unable to grieve loss from no deeper relationship, no sense of self, and no recognizing the self of others, behavior and reaction, which is manipulation. 2.
You know, Anissa, I'm a strong believer in we are here, we're placed here to learn specific lessons in our lives. And we go through these experiences. And I think that as we move through life and we learn different things and we become more educated and we're on this journey towards enlightenment, I believe that we get to a stage where we surrender. And for me, surrendering means the acceptance of knowing that I'm on this journey to constantly learn. So whichever experiences come toward me, and some may seem very negative, some may seem or evoke a response from me, which I've done on many occasions. Why me? Why do I have to go through this? Why am I the one that's always having to learn these lessons? But when you start to look at it from a point where you've surrendered in accepting that this is my journey and I have made a choice to go on this path of enlightenment, I have to accept what comes, and what I may perceive something to be, or however negative I may perceive it to be, or hopeless, or it's seemingly, people are up against me, or have bad things to say. But there is there is this light at the end of it all, through the darkness, that thread of some lesson that's meant to be learned from it. And if we start to look and focus on that rather than the seeming darkness around it, that is what makes us, or allows us to surrender easier, and it allows us to learn the lesson quicker. And we will continue learning the lessons, but it's about how we respond and retaliate and get back up from it that makes us stronger as individuals. And for me, I don't think that we will ever come to the end of that journey of enlightenment, because there's always something to learn. Even I feel in death, we do not reach it, because we come back to learn again and experience again and to improve on who we were. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about constantly improving, constantly learning, constantly forgiving, constantly shedding judgment, surrendering. and allowing yourself to get into that space of flow and acceptance.
Jamila, were you listening to any of my conversations this week somewhat, somehow? Because, it's so, I am just in awe because all of these things that we're discussing here today has been my week and has been around surrendering. Because when we're surrendering, we're really living from a place of equanimity, that understanding of impermanence, understanding that we don't actually have control. We never had control, but we are grieving. And again, the topic today was around self-care and grief. And the pain and the suffering is because of the grief of what we expected somebody to show up as in our lives, the grief in the real terms of a death of someone, loss of income. I mean, I know people that are struggling at the moment globally that is losing income, and the loss of that income makes them show up very differently, because the survival thing that you were talking about. But when we're in survival, we cannot attract or manifest prosperity or operate from a place of grace or gratitude. When we're in survival, we don't know how to surrender because we're in that absolute hustle mode, hustling to fight for survival for the fittest, whether it is fighting with people, whether it is fighting for income or fighting for our position or fighting to be heard, understood, and acknowledged. So there's a constant fight and battle, and it's not sustainable. So I love the concept that you bring in about surrendering. Until we learn surrendering is that art of mastering self in the chaos, in the noise, in when those high tides come in and the waves about to hit you, or that storm, and the fact that there's a hurricane now in the Caribbean. What happens? We go into fight, flight, freeze mode. We have no idea how to deal with it. But it's in the beauty of the surrender. And I love the lotus flower because it does grow in its essence, in its beauty, in that mud. And until we understand it's in the darkness, in the mud, in the absolute mess of it all, that this imperfect mess is important, not to get to perfection, but to be okay with not being okay, being okay with grieving of what it is, what we expected life to be. So
and I think, I think also in offering that to other people that are around us. So in as much as we accept that about ourselves, we need to also extend that gift to others who are around us. And the minute that we can accept that, there's a common space of understanding amongst individuals, because I can see it in you and you can see it in me, and we then address each other with empathy, sensitivity, compassion, and understanding. But it has to come from us first for us to be able to extend that to someone else. And it makes such a huge difference. There's no Prince Charming nor Wendy to sew the shadow back on. It's not healthy or fair to the other. Our help is within. Those are such powerful words, Ronald. Our help is within. And that's where we tend to look for it everywhere else, externally, whether it's in other people or whether it's in activities that we do or titles that we try to achieve. But it's just the simplicity of actually looking within. And it says in the simplicity comes the difficulty as well, because it's by no means anything easy to do, is it? And until we attempt it, do we realize the difficulty in it, but also comes the realization of the great strength that we possess within ourselves.
I want to just acknowledge some more Instagram people that are here. Welcome, Andre, and welcome, Avril. I'm not sure if there are comments that can filter through from Instagram. So let us know. Maybe I'm just not seeing it, but there's a few of you that are on here. How are you feeling as an imperfectly perfect human being going through a human experience or spiritual experience in this earthly realm? It's just being who we are supposed to be, not for the sake of others. I love this last comment from Ronald because absolutely one has to understand that this need to be externally validated, or the belonging that we put out there, the belonging is belonging within yourself. And until you come back home to that truest divine essence of who you always were, until you see the pure soul that you are, you're always going to seek it outside. And the very idea of seeking and craving and desiring and yearning is all the root cause for suffering. When we can set aside that seeking and desiring and yearning in the unhealthy sense of outside validation. I was also having a conversation today, Jamila, with a peer coach, and I said, whilst ICF certification is important, is it really that important to go do the work in serving others and impacting people? No. What is it going to give us? Yes, it's going to give us more credibility. Yes, you potentially are going to get larger corporate deals that you can, that where corporates are more fussy and they want to see a certification and not just an accreditation. But if we are in true surrender mode and we know that our provisions is from a higher power and that we are all here for a purpose, we need to also be very clear that a piece of paper, a title, a label, status, prestige is all an illusion. Again, this is just my perspective and opinion from my own lived experience, where I thought that all of those things was going to make me feel like I've arrived. It doesn't.
Anissa, it's, you said that, have I been in your ear? Have I been observing your conversation? I swear I can say exactly the same thing to you. And especially on this point, because I mean, I just came back from lunch with a friend of mine, and she's a psychologist. And we were talking about what our effect is in this line of business that we've chosen to go into. What is it that sets us apart from anyone else? And for me, that's the relatability, the connection that you have with the people that you are engaging with. And how does that come? That comes more from your practical experience of situations that you've been through, more so than it does with the number of degrees that are attached or titles that are attached to you. Because I could be someone who is totally an introvert and socially awkward and not wanting to engage in any sort of experiences with other people, or my life alone, and I can concentrate merely on just being an academic. And again, my opinion, and I'm no judgment here or anything else, but that's all that I focus on learning and the theoretical aspect towards understanding and drawing from other people's experiences. But it gives me no personal relatability with someone who's gone through a divorce, for example, or someone who's raising a child on their own, or someone who's come from an abusive background, or someone who has been whatever the case may be. But when you have that personal experience, you resonate differently with someone who's also had that experience. And it gives you a certain amount of humility as well, because of the experience that you've come from, depending on how much you've worked on yourself as well. It allows you a certain vulnerability within yourself and with what you offer to the person or to your client or to your son or daughter or whoever it is, or it gives you a different understanding of what someone might be going through. And it's so important, again, to touch on allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to share, to accept, and to realize that we are doing the best that we can do as we go along through our lives and our experiences. So again, it's almost as if you were there in the discussion with me.
So you met with your psychologist friend, and I met with the psychologist lady. That it was a professional meeting. It was, I met her at a graduation ceremony where I was the MC, but I coached the entrepreneurs in that cohort, and she's in CSI type work, and there was sort of resonance. And the company she works for is a sponsor of this program. And so I said to her, look, we haven't actually had the opportunity to meet, and we've been trying to set up some time, and we didn't. And what was meant to be a professional exchange, and normally it's very formal. And I said to her, listen, I'm just here to have a conversation. And whichever way this conversation goes, it's about your point, relatability, common ground. What is the common ground here? You, a wellness practitioner, so am I, right? So we're both in a professional realm, but we also have personal aspirations. How can we work together and collaborate? And the conversation, I can tell you now, for the almost hour and a half, was not about how can we work together in the professional sense. It was meeting the person at their level. It was getting to know the person for who they are, not to come with my status of I'm a coach in the neuroscience modality and this is all my experiences and what about you? Because that's ego. It was really just a sharing of a meeting of minds to say, tell me, what are the problems that you're going through right now? What challenges or obstacles or barriers are you faced with?
But
I made it clear.
It's about
Yeah, I
relating
was
and
saying,
sharing our stories.
yes, so this is where I was going. It's like I was saying to her, I'm really here, and as much as I'm very comfortable being daring and vulnerable and sharing very openly and quite candidly about my life, I'm almost using that as an invitation, because when you're an introvert, number one, you're not necessarily going to share. But when the other person on the other side of you is demonstrating, you mentioned being brave and vulnerable and all of those things, it opens the lines of communication to be more human. And there's humility, and there is resonance, and there's relatability. So I'm playing back all your words back to you, because it was as if we were meeting the same people in different cities, and they're both
Yes.
psychologists and we both coaches. And it was
Yeah.
also during lunchtime just before we went live. So we're kind of
Yeah.
still in that vibrational energy of having that conversation. So as much as our guests couldn't make it here today, this is clearly the core message that was meant to be conveyed in this forum today. So nothing
That's
by default, but by design.
Yeah, absolutely, by design. And I mean, how much more of confirmation do we need? Like you said, two different cities, two different experiences with two different people, but the synchronicity of it is undeniable. Absolutely undeniable. And this is the thing, with sharing our stories, Anissa. Not only does it allow for the other person to see your vulnerability, but you also allow them the gift of being vulnerable as well. And that's so
Yes.
important for us to do. It comes with a lot of respect for the other person, but it allows a safe space. It allows us to connect so much more deeply with each other, irrespective of what our lifestyles are, what our professions are, where we live in the world. We've seen this. We've had guests that have come on from across the ocean. And then we've had guests that have come from our backyards, that we're sitting, but the commonality that we all possess
Yeah.
as human beings, as beings in this world, is something that we need to focus on rather than looking at our differences. And once we're able to do that, it puts us on such a comfortable spot for us to, first of all, look at ourselves with acceptance, with pride, with grace, with gratitude, and then also offer that to those that we interact with. And it also allows us to draw our tribe, right? It's to draw the
Yeah.
right people into our space as well, who will then be with us on this journey for however long it might be, in pushing us towards that enlightenment that we so look to seek and achieve.
No, it's very valid. And I mean, we both in very large different groups. You've got your shift happens once a month, a gathering of people from all walks of life and coming in there to share either as a subject matter expert or sharing lived experiences. I've got my sacred sisterhood, and I see Sajida has also joined us here on Instagram. Welcome. But there's a sacred sisterhood that I'm with, and these are ladies as in their 20s up to their 60s, and there's a sacredness in sharing different stories, different experiences, vast context. But the commonality is that we see ourselves in parts of their story, not necessarily the same story.
Mhm.
So when we can see ourselves, then we can lead with more empathy. And what's transpired, and Jamila, I'm going to extend this invitation to you and other women that might be listening. And I know you're not necessarily from Cape Town, but or maybe volume two. I'll mention it now. I was on the radio with the facilitator of the Sacred Sister retreats, Sumaya, and she's a host, guest host on the Islamic Radio 786. And she asked me to be joiner this week and just to share these journeys of these people and what happens there. And it's almost like an accelerated healing, because when we come together in these groups, whether it is shift happens, and I love the name because shifts happen within that setting in the same way that shifts happen, and healing is almost accelerated in these groups. So one of the things that we said we're going to do and invite ladies is we're going to be launching an anthology around the sacred diaries of Cape Town Muslim women.
Wow.
And all of what we're discussing here in all these different theoretical terms or actual vulnerable shares that we're doing here, it's inviting people to come with their stories and bring it out into the world. Because it's when we bring these stories to the surface level, we're almost releasing ourselves from it, from the shame, the pain, the grief. And only then can we lead with the shift that happens. I think I'm on a roll today with shift happens
Shift
here.
happens.
But I want you to contribute to that, because share with me what happens in that shift happens group and forum. And maybe it's also time that we expand these groups. I mean, I know you have people joining, but shouldn't there be more people? We need to have more of this movement
Absolutely.
going.
Absolutely, Anissa. And I think that the reason why we started the group, firstly, it's our company is called Shift Happens. And what my two partners, Etienne and Mark, and I wanted to do is we wanted to create a conference of sorts, an annual conference that integrated like-minded people in the space that we are at, searching for answers, to meet once a year and to kind of like do a take, an African take on a mind valley. And we thought that in order to be able to do that, we needed a community. And so we started this Shift Happens community, where I invited some of the friends and the other two invited. And we started off with a group of about 6, and we now have grown to, I mean, I think there's about 50 of us on the group. And not
Wow.
everyone can make it every month,
Mhm.
but what we do is we find a speaker for that session, and they will come to us and deliver a talk on whatever it is that they focus on in their lives. And it has to do with the esoteric, it's got to do with the spiritual, it's got to do with mind, body, and soul. So, it's vast and interesting, and we get to share with each other. And through this has been going on now for maybe about a year and a half, and we've grown to become such good friends. It's been a great networking a module for us to use. And what we are about to do now is to launch our conference, where we will have people like yourself and other like-minded people who have something to share, in an attempt to make this a better world for us to live in, to raise our consciousness, our collective consciousness, and to help each other to grow from our experiences, from our failures and challenges, and to just be better people. So what we do is we have people who come to us once a month, and they are here physically. But since last month, we've included a Zoom link. So whoever would like to join will have the opportunity to experience the talk for themselves, to engage in the discussions. And it's just a very safe space where you are able to share your experiences, concerns, questions, ask questions, and get to know more people. So by all means, yes, of course, we would love to grow the community, and soon I hope we will all get to see each other physically, get to see more of each other. I mean, Anissa, you and I have only had the pleasure, twice now, of being in each other's
Yes.
physically being in each other's companies. And there's so many more people that we would love to, to speak with and to share our time with and presence with. And I think maybe what we should do is offer the Zoom a
I
link
think so.
on
I
our
think so, yeah.
platform here. But again, with your sacred sisterhood, I think that there's so many women who have their stories to share who are outside of Cape Town as well. And it would be such an honor and privilege, to be included in that. And the more stories that we put out there, the more lives we touch, the more people we help. And the, we can be of better assistance to each other and feel a part of a community. Because for many, many years, me going through my breakup and just generally in life, where you feel like you're the black sheep or you don't fit in, you go through this experience on your own. And it's daunting, and it's sometimes unnecessary, because, there's certain lessons that you could have very well learned ahead of
Sure.
time. If you just had the support,
Absolutely.
if you just had that someone who was actively listening and holding that space for you. So I think that's what this is all about. And our podcast, when we spoke about it, that was our objective, is to create safe space, to create that space where you could be unapologetically yourself.
Absolutely.
And for
Absolutely.
us to learn from
We've
each.
got I can't believe we're at the end, and I now want to, like, we're just getting warmed up here.
I know,
But
right?
I want to say, this particular segment, I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to people like Ronald, to you, Jamila, who has stayed the course. I think we're in our almost 8th month now, if I'm not mistaken, of the segment. We have grown so beautifully. I think we are booked up with only international guests up until September. I do want to extend the invitation to those, as you say so nicely, in our backyard. Please
Yes.
don't hesitate to reach out to Jamila or myself if you feel You want to be unapologetically you, and you want to share your hero's journey of whatever that dark night of the soul experience might have been for you, and how you have shifted from that grudge victim consciousness into grit, grace, and gratitude. So, on that note, I want to just be thankful and grateful to everybody that continuously supports us, whether you're commenting or not, whether you are showing us your presence through a reaction or not, and whether you're not even clicking the attend link. We know you are there, so we just want to extend our deepest, deepest gratitude, because without you, this wouldn't be growing in the way that it is. So thank you for those that silently also message me. And I'm supposed you as well, Jamila, who shares that they appreciate the vulnerability and the honesty and the unapologetic rawness of what we share here. On that note, it's over to you to say your goodbyes.
Yeah, I think I just want to highlight my gratitude also, Anissa, to you, because you reached out and highlighted that there's something here that we could do. And I think I was a little bit hesitant, but I felt brave. But you gave me that extra nudge because I didn't have any experience being on a podcast or speaking my story or sharing my experiences, and you made that very easy for me. So you helped me along in this journey and have grown immensely, and large part of that is, I must say thank you to you, because you've made a difference in my life. You've made a huge
Oh,
difference in my life, and the thing is that
thank
we don't
you.
realize the impact that we have on other people. You're just doing this naturally, and I'm sure you came from a certain space as well, where your beginnings were. But in that experience of yours, you've been generous enough to take people along on this journey with you. And that's what you've done for me. And that's what I'd like to send out this message to everybody out there is, don't be afraid to take someone on that journey with you. You will only gain from it. And the impact that you have on someone's life, you will never truly understand until they say thank you to you. And today I say thank you to you, Anissa, for
Thank
making
you.
that change and making the difference in my life, and to let you know that I appreciate you. And I appreciate and I'm so grateful for your presence in my life, as I am with you, Ronald, and with all our weekly day ones, I would call them, who've shown us support. We have such gratitude for you. And, thank you for sharing your stories with us. It's not always easy, but you've put yourself out there and been brave enough to do so, and have helped us all appreciate the journeys that we follow in our lives. So, yeah, I think today's theme would be one of gratitude.
Yes, very much.
And
It's come through as a resounding major,
yeah,
major theme is that there is gratitude. And thank you for enriching my life too, Jamila. It's been equally enriching the experience. And we cannot do this alone. We do need to bring others along the journey. And there's enough for everyone. So as much as Jamila and I are both coaches, I don't feel threatened in any way. I feel that we must bring people along so that the impact is more far reaching. And thank you for trusting me to bring you along. And we are both celebrating being co-authors. So we
yes,
haven't celebrated that.
not
We
yet.
have gratitude for that too.
We have gratitude for it, and I think a proper celebration is in
I
order.
tell you what, let's do the following. Let's get all the South African co-authors on one of the segments. We're going to only be able to do that in September, unfortunately, because that's the only available slot at the end of September.
Yeah.
And for those that want to join us from October, and if we'll put the Calendly link in here as well as the Zoom link for Shift Happens, and then we can take it from there. And we'll have a celebratory live to talk about these stories and maybe narrate some of them, because that's going to be very bold.
Absolutely. Thank you,
On
Anissa.
that
Thank you
note,
to our listeners.
Bye
And I hope you
until
have a
next week.
fantastic weekend. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll end the live. Thank you for the LinkedIn, the Instagram people that were here. Next time, I'm going to want to see more of your comments as well. And have a good weekend. Until next week, we'll see you then. I'm going to end the live.